Hello everybody and welcome to another video. I wanted to throw out a Q&A for today. Now there has been a little bit of news. Arena did a post talking about PvP reward tracks we'll get to a little later in the week. But for the first week in a while, we've kind of died down a bit with the news. They already confirmed there's not going to be a guild chat this week. And of course they've just come out of tons of reveals. Now we did a big video yesterday talking about the raids, and there's a lot of things that I want to address. But instead of bogging those down in this Q&A, which I absolutely could do, let's just do a little bit of a briefer one and see where we go from there. So let's jump straight into it. If you've got any questions of your own, feel free to leave them below. To touch on something from the previous episode, we were talking a little bit about Ratasum, and just one thing I wanted to throw out to people. I was asked the question, you know, what's below Ratasum if it was destroyed and it failed? I can't believe this has come up in so many Q&As in a row. But I kind of immediately went into a response that dived into Guild Wars 1 and the way that the map could eventually work, and there might not be too much water there because they don't want to have too much underwater content and so on and so forth. And a lot of people just said, oh yeah, but wooden potatoes, we know there's water under there. I've broken out of the map and I've gone down. Now, while that may be true, I guess I failed with answering my question to sort of address straight away that I don't actually think what we see under Ratasum right now, or anywhere around Ratasum, we should take seriously. Like, that serious placeholder stuff. If you've ever broken out of that map, whether that be going under the city or by going into the mountainous and jungly areas around the outside, it's incredibly placeholder. They're just basically hills everywhere with no detail at all, and like big textures that have been slapped on there and scaled up so huge you feel like you're playing some kind of 1997 PlayStation 1 game. So I really don't think we should take the fact that there's water underneath Ratasum as a huge thing right now, but yeah, maybe they would end up running with that. Anyway, so yeah, let's jump into the questions. The first one's from Sebastian Laufer, who says, how is it, wooden potatoes, and this is based around a new update that's gone in, that your party members are appearing as yellow dots on my minimap? Well, this sounds like it's probably a bit of a boring question, but this is a segue for me to explain some news to you guys. The devs actually said that basically what's happened now is when you're in your guild, when you're repping your guild, any guildies you have will appear as a different color on your map. That means on your mini-map, and specifically it's supposed to work in the open world. Now, right now it's kind of broken. It's working when you're in parties and when you're in small instances, and the idea that ArenaNet have is that when you're in a party or in a squad, no matter what, the people around you should appear as blue dots. They shouldn't appear as yellow dots. And right now it's broken, so sometimes people are blue, sometimes they're yellow, sometimes it's half and half in the same dungeon. It's just kind of messy. The idea is, and they weren't perfectly clarifying on this statement, but the idea is that you'll be able to open your world map and see where your guildies are, because the orange dots will appear when they're outside of your party. Now, if this works, in theory, to show you the locations of guildmates that aren't even in the same map as you. So, for example, we're in Queensdale, and we have a guildmate who's at the Derman Priory in Lorna's Pass, and we have another guildmate who's battling the Risen High Wizard at the Gates to Ara, and we have another guildie who's in Fireheart Rise. We can press M, zoom out on our world map, and we'll see all these glorious yellow dots all over the place. That's a really exciting idea to me, because I love the idea of, I've mentioned this already, one of the things I'm really excited about for Heart of Thorns is the map reward system. The idea that you could have a utility guild now, because there's kind of this cross-guild chat, even when you're not repping guilds, where you get people who really learn maps very intimately and run like farms and trains and stuff on those maps. So you'd be able to press M, like say you're doing map completion, you'd be able to wander around the map, you'd be able to press M and you'd say, oh god, look, there's a ton of guildies here. Oh, they must be doing something interesting. I'll go check it out. Or you press M for your map completion and you realize that you've got like one guildie way off in one corner of the map who's doing something. You strive to go and hang out with them. It means people are going to meet up more, and it adds more of those social features. This is exactly the kind of thing that having a dedicated guild team at ArenaNet means we, the players, get to start enjoying. If it works that way. I have a fear that maybe it will only show, you know, other guildies who are in Queensdale while we're in Queensdale. The alternate is much more exciting, though. Next question is a lore question from William Botsford, who says, how do you think that the Sylvan Hounds, which are made by the Pale Tree and best friends with the Sylvari, will be affected by Morgemoth? Do you think they'll do something with that at all? Actually, I was recently playing the personal story as a Sylvari, and I was a little disappointed because in the personal story, and even I think through some dialogue you get in the Grove, it's kind of established that the Hounds are great supplementary forces to the Wardens. The Wardens defend the Grove specifically, and the Hounds are also defending the Grove. And there's definitely a personal story step that really pushes light on this idea. And then I'm kind of disappointed to see that Season 2 of The Living World, where the Grove is attacked, right, that we didn't see large numbers of Sylvan Hounds fighting to protect the Grove, as presumably they're supposed to be trained to be. I don't know if we're going to get a story like that where the Grove gets attacked again. We're all probably quite tired of the whole, oh, this city gets attacked, this city gets attacked. Lion's Arch specifically, right? We're probably a little bit tired of that. It was disappointing for me as well to find that in the personal story. I'd completely forgotten about this until very recently, but one of the lowlights of the entire personal story is a random huge attack on Queen Jenna in the throne room by the Risen, suggesting the Risen and Zaitan had some immense huge attack on Divinity's Reach, where they breached the entire city, ransacked the whole place, got to the palace, threatened Queen Jenna's life, and this situation is like thrown to us in one story that we do, and then we just move on, and you never see any fallout or build up to it. It's just terrible. Anyway, city's being attacked. I don't know how much more ArenaNet are going to do of that, so we may not see this, but what will happen to these guys, these defenders of the Grove? Can Morgemoth corrupt them just as he can corrupt the Sylvari themselves? And well, the answer to that is yes. Morgemoth isn't just taking Sylvari and making them his own minions, turning them into Morgem Guard. He can corrupt anything he damn well pleases, and the Hounds are absolutely going to be in the same situation. They're a little bit more interesting, though, because of the Nightmare Court, and the fact that the Nightmare Court have kind of, it would seem, been doing something similar to this with those for a while, and creating what they call Thorn Wolves. Thorn Wolves, of course, being very interesting, because Thorn Wolves also appeared in Guild Wars 1, alongside the Wardens from Guild Wars 1, who lived in the Echoveld Forest, thus feeding fuel to this theory that there was Sylvari in the Echoveld Forest once upon a time. So, we will see. I hope that ArenaNet do pay a little attention to them, because they're a part of Sylvari culture, and this is going to be a big Sylvari-based expansion, so hopefully they've paid regard to that kind of stuff. Next question is from Kevin J, who says, WP, have you ever been the type to play online games you own at an internet cafe? When I was younger and using a computer that didn't cut it for the ever-improving games, I'd go to these cafes and I'd have a great time with improved graphics speed and a community of gamer friends. Now, I did try this. This is the funny thing. I did try this. I would often try and do internet cafe stuff while I was away from home, whether that be a holiday or something, and I wanted to keep in touch or be able to do something for a short period of time. But my experience with this has never really paid off. Now, I wasn't necessarily from a very wealthy family as I grew up, so it wasn't like I ever had totally beast PCs, and hell, most of the time I didn't even have access to a PC or a console. So it was a really exciting idea to me, and a long time ago I liked that social element too. But in the end, my experience of this have only ever been that it was overpriced, kind of gritty, and generally I'd rather be elsewhere. So unfortunately I've never been one of these kind of guys, and I feel like I've missed out actually. I just thought that was a really interesting question, completely out of the blue. I like questions like that. Moving on, Greg C says, do you think, this is coming about probably because of all of the support talk we've been having recently, do you think that Waterfield blast healing should be based on the healing power of the blaster or the field owner to balance them, or something else entirely? This is a great question, because people, me, often say, oh, you know, blast healing basically invalidates the need for healing power as a stat set. Why? Because you don't need healing power to drop a water field that everyone in glass offensive stats can blast and then heal everyone up to max. The idea of speccing for healing power is useless because you don't need it to get these full heals. And so the obvious thing a lot of people say, and short-sightedly say, is, oh yeah, they should just make it scale with healing power. This is a great question. Where should it scale? At what point? And so what does this question mean? Because I think it can be really hard to answer. So in the example that we say it scales off of the blasts, this means a Zerky offensive glass character who is pure offensive will blast in the field and they won't do very much. But a healing character who blasts in the field will do a lot more. But if you have it on the field instead, then that Zerky glassy guy can still blast as long as the field was dropped by the healing person. And so then I think having it on the field is absolutely the way to go forwards. But I wonder whether they don't do this, because to do such a thing isn't to just have like water fields, which are these unified things, but water fields have to remember where they've been cast from and change their effects based on what that thing that created them was. And if they could, in theory, do this, why wouldn't we see this on some of the other fields as well? For example, they could tap into this idea and have, as you increase QandA damage, if you drop a poison field and somebody shoots a projectile through it, instead of applying one stack of poison now, it could apply multiple stacks of poison at once. Or if you had lots of QandA duration and you drop a poison field, when people blast it, the weakness that comes out would be longer. These are actually exciting ideas. If you've got a lot of boon duration, maybe when someone blasts in your fire field, it has a lot longer might uptime, and then, you know, they can balance might to have shorter uptime by default from your fire fields, unless you actually have a lot of boon duration when you drop it. Now, these are really interesting ideas, and why don't ArenaNet do them? Is it because they think it's a bit obscure mechanically and difficult for players to understand? Is it because they didn't foresee this would be important? Or is it an engine limitation? I kind of lean towards a third, but I'm interested in what you guys have to say. The next question is from Brandon Lutz, who says, what's your favourite piece of lore in Guild Wars 2 that references something obscure or little which was in the first game? There are a lot of great things that reference the first game. Now, you say little thing. One of the things that jumps to my mind straight away is the Sunken Temple of the Ages in Queensdale. Now, the area in general isn't necessarily a little thing, but I do find the skill point in the very middle, which references the idea that the temple was somehow where time began, really interesting. In general, as like a large feature that I really enjoy Guild Wars 2, and I think they did very well for this, were the gravestones. Graves are fantastic. Being able to interact with graves pretty much anywhere in the world. Sometimes you get something funny, often you get something new, but sometimes you'll find something really cool. Like one of my favourite places in all of the Shiver Peaks is in Dredgehaunt Cliffs at the Granite Citadel. The Granite Citadel looks just like it did in the first game, you know, just add a few years onto it and a shiny, a new game engine. And looking at all the graves there, you don't just get that wonderful reference back to the first game, you physically feel like you've gone back to the first game in that place, but then all the graves are referencing old characters you once loved, and it even interacts beautifully into the heart too. So graves, just across the whole game, are fantastic. Someone gave me the idea of doing like a video that's a world tour of the graves and just talking about them as we go, and I think that's a really interesting idea. Similar to the graves too, all over Ascalon, you can interact with piles of rubble that aren't necessarily direct references to the first game, but they do refer to the events that occurred through Ascalon and just kind of give you a sense of the history of the place, which I also do really enjoy. I think the main little one isn't really lore-based at all as a reference back to the first game, but there is actually a reference, I think it's in Gendaran Fields. Back in Guild Wars 1, there was a farm you could do against undead, where you would play what's called a 55 HP monk. I'm not going to go into the discussion of how that worked here, but you'd play as this character and kill undead so that you could farm these emblems, and then you could trade them in, I think it was Halloween, or was it Winter's Day? Anyway, it was this really popular farm, and you can go to that exact place in Guild Wars 2, and there's a little reference to it. It's basically saying, rest in peace, 55 HP monks, and the idea of 55 HP is one of those super classic retro ideas in Guild Wars at this point to me, like one of the first tank, one of the first farm builds, and that was a really nice thing to know about. Next, we've got the Golden Char, who says, what do you think of the theory that since Morgemoth can clone people and theoretically bring them back to life, one day we may have a Scarlet attacking us again as a boss? Woo! I don't think ArenaNet's going to do this, because I think we've had our fill of Scarlet, but the general idea, I think there's motivation for Morgemoth to do this. I think there's space for it. I think it's possible. And just in terms of the actual narrative, it could be something that could have been seen. I think if Arena absolutely want to do this, right? If they really want to play into this cloning thing and bring back, you know, previously dead people, okay? Because they could have done this with Zaitan as well, for what it's worth. If they want to do this, and Scarlet is going to return as a Morgem Guard, I think it should be a really small, like, almost Easter egg style throwaway. We had a discussion about this earlier in the week, and that is how I would rather they deal with this Scarlet situation. This has come up to me a few times now. I'm sure some of us are very excited by the idea of hearing Scarlet's laugh. It's been a whole year since we've heard that, guys. Of course we want that back, right? Right? Well, maybe not. I actually think most of us don't, so even though it fits in the story, we're probably not gonna see it. Let's have Morgemoth clone some cooler stuff, shall we? The last two questions for today come from Lawrence Tyder. The first one says, do you think we'll see more of the characters of Ghosts of Ascalon, Destiny's Edge 1.5? They've become only footnotes in the game, only having cameos. Yeah, this is really disappointing, actually. It's been a long time since many of us even read that book. And yeah, to see like Dougal Keen just wandering around with his thumb up his arse in Lion's Arch not doing anything is really sad to me. So to bring those of you in the loop who may not know who Dougal is or some of these other characters, you have 5 years before Guild Wars 2 launches, like in the timeline, the establishment of Destiny's Edge, okay? And so these main characters like Ritlock and Kaith and Air and so forth, they were all kind of met together and they had their big story in their fight against Kralkatorrik 5 years ago. But there's actually another novel, the first novel that they released, mind you, called Ghosts of Ascalon, and this is actually set just a year before the events of Guild Wars 2. And many of the characters that were featured there are still alive, some are not, and they are still around, and you can meet them in-game. So they got like this whole story, but what do they actually mean for the gameplay? Not too much. Maybe they do deserve more of a spotlight shone on them, but I also like the idea that sometimes in the game you might interact with a character and you don't realize there's a whole novel worth of information based on them, and in the game they're just kind of a nobody at this point. I like that in some ways, but maybe that's just a personal taste thing, and I certainly wouldn't be offended to see Dougal Keane come in and save the day at the last moment in friggin' Heart of Thorns. I'd be like, oh my god, Dougal was the main character in Heart of Thorns? Who would have seen that coming? That would be a bit of a mind blow, I must say. And the other question that they asked was, do you think we'll ever see Ritloc's warband? Or maybe a reveal that he's actually a Gladium, but Ritlock being so awesome, the Char haven't rejected him. Alright, the second part, he definitely has a warband, okay? He's got the stone warband. And they kind of touched on it a little in Season 1. I don't think they've forgotten this, right? And actually, you might think, when you think of Destiny's Edge, regular Destiny's Edge, and you think of, oh, who's the most mysterious character? Maybe there was argument for Kaith for a long time. Especially before we knew about the wind stuff, and when they started playing into it a little bit more in Living World Season 1. Sure, it seemed like, and like Aether Path came out and they gave us all that new information. Kaith could have been it. Kaith is definitely the most edgy member, I would say, and, you know, she's got that dark streak to her, and she's a pretty exciting character. But at absolutely this point, who has the most mysterious past? It's Ritlock. Even Air, who's kind of got this cool stuff, is like, oh, she had a son, and she had this whole relationship and stuff we don't know about. I still think Ritlock... and of course the poster child for this isn't even his warband, which yes, they've been very cagey about, but it's Sahothin, you know, how he got this sword. I think there are stories to tell there, but I actually don't think that those stories will be revealed in Heart of Thorns. I think they're best suited for the theoretical Char-based expansion, Guild Wars 2 Cogs of War, or Cow, or whatever you want to call it. So hopefully they just kind of put a lot more focus on Ritlock in this expansion, and people appreciate that mystery behind him. And then there's a wonderful segue then, of course, to do the Char-based thing later down the road, if it's maybe the next 6-pack, or a couple down the line. But there you go, guys. That's the Q&A for today. Thank you very much for watching. Hope you enjoyed some of these answers. If you've got any questions of your own, I'd love to hear them, and I'll see you next time.